Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Let me tell you about something that happened to my daughter yesterday. She's 40 years old, works full-time at a local accounting firm, and has been living on her own for over 20 years. She's always been independent and knows how to stand up for herself, which is something I'm proud of as her parent. My daughter had just finished a long day at work. She'd been dealing with difficult clients all afternoon, reviewing tax documents that didn't make sense, and trying to meet impossible deadlines. All she wanted was to grab a few groceries and head home to her apartment where she could finally relax. She needed milk, bread, some frozen dinners for the week, and cat food for her own cat, who was waiting at home. The grocery store was busier than usual for a Wednesday evening. They were short-staffed and only had one cashier working the front checkout. My daughter told me there were at least 8 people ahead of her in line when she got there. She was tired. Her feet hurt from wearing heels all day, and she just wanted to get through the line and go home. While she was waiting, she noticed this woman walking around the checkout area. The woman was carrying a cat in one of those harnesses that people use to take their pets places. She had a few items in her arms, nothing major, just some cat treats and what looked like a small bag of cat litter. But instead of getting in line like everyone else, she kept circling around the checkout area like she was looking for something. My daughter said she could tell right away that this woman was planning to cut in line. She had that look about her, like she thought she was more important than everyone else who had been waiting. The woman kept looking at the front of the line and then at her cat, like she was building up some kind of excuse in her head. My daughter had been standing there for about 10 minutes. The line was moving slowly because the cashier was new and having trouble with the register. People were getting frustrated, but everyone was being patient and waiting their turn. Everyone except this woman with the cat. When it was finally my daughter's turn, she stepped forward and started putting her items on the conveyor belt. She was relieved to finally be next. But then this entitled woman practically knocked her over and shoved her way to the front. The woman pushed past my daughter and started putting her items down in front of the cashier like she owned the place. My daughter called out to the woman, telling her to excuse herself for cutting in line. The woman turned around and looked at my daughter like she was crazy for even speaking to her. The woman told my daughter that she had a cat and was in a hurry. That was it. That was her entire explanation for cutting in front of everyone who had been waiting. Like having a pet gave her some kind of special privilege to skip the line. My daughter said the audacity of this woman was unbelievable. My daughter wasn't having any of it. She reached over, picked up the woman's items, and handed them back to her. My daughter told the woman that it didn't work that way and that she needed to get in the back of the line. The woman's face turned red. She looked around like she expected everyone else to side with her, but the other customers in line were clearly on my daughter's side. A few people even nodded in approval. The woman looked at the cashier with this incredulous expression, like she expected the employee to back her up and tell my daughter to let her cut in line. She asked the cashier if she could believe what was happening. The cashier was young, probably in her early 20s, but she handled the situation perfectly. She shook her head and looked the woman straight in the eye. The cashier told the woman that she couldn't believe her behavior and that she needed to be in line like everybody else. The woman stood there for a moment, holding her cat and her items, looking absolutely furious that her plan hadn't worked. She looked at my daughter, then at the cashier, then at the other customers in line, but nobody was backing down. Finally, she huffed and walked to the back of the line. My daughter said she could hear her complaining to her cat about the whole situation, like the animal was going to give her sympathy. The cashier rang up my daughter's items with a smile. When my daughter was getting ready to leave, the cashier quietly thanked her for standing up to the woman. People tried to cut in line all the time, and the cashier appreciated having a customer who wasn't afraid to speak up. My daughter told me about it when she called me on her way home. She was still a little shaken up by the whole thing, but mostly she was proud of herself for not letting this entitled woman walk all over her. She said the woman's excuse was the most ridiculous thing she'd ever heard. Having a pet doesn't give you the right to cut in line any more than being in a hurry does. When my daughter got home, she told her own cat about the incident. Her cat seemed much better behaved than the one that woman was carrying around, probably because my daughter actually taught her pet proper manners instead of using it to be rude to other people. I'm a college student working part-time at a small bistro downtown to help pay for my textbooks and rent. The restaurant is one of those cute local places that tourists love. We only have about 15 tables, but we're always packed because of our location near the waterfront. I've been working here for about 8 months now, mostly evening shifts on weekends. Usually it's pretty straightforward: take orders, serve food, clean tables, go home. The customers are mostly nice. And the worst I usually deal with is someone complaining that their steak is too well done or asking to split a check 12 different ways. About 2 weeks ago, we got this really sweet email from a woman asking about making a reservation for something special. She didn't go into too much detail, but she mentioned wanting to surprise her boyfriend with something important and asked if we could set up a more private table with some decorations. She was super polite about it and even offered to pay extra for the setup. My manager loves these kinds of requests when people are reasonable about them. We've done anniversary dinners, birthday surprises, even a few small proposals. This woman wasn't asking for anything crazy, just a corner table with some privacy and permission to add a few decorations. We picked out this little corner table that's tucked away in a nook. It's still part of the main dining room, but it's separated enough that you can't really see into it from the other tables. My manager and I spent about an hour that afternoon setting it up with string lights, some candles, and a small bouquet of flowers. It looked really romantic. The woman came in about an hour before her reservation to add her own personal touch. She had brought this small framed photo that clearly meant something special to her. I didn't want to pry, but from her nervous excitement, I could tell this dinner was a big deal for her. She placed it carefully on the table and thanked us about 5 times before leaving. When the night of the reservation came, I was working with just one other server since we're a small place. Everything was going smoothly until about 10 minutes before the couple was supposed to arrive. I was in the kitchen grabbing some bread baskets when I heard my co-worker calling for me. I rushed out to find the couple standing at the host stand, looking confused and a little upset. They told me their last name, and I immediately recognized them as our special reservation. I grabbed 2 menus and started walking them toward their decorated corner table, already excited to see their reaction to the setup. That's when I saw her, some old lady sitting at their table with a kid who looked about 8 years old. They had their coats draped over the chairs, purses on the table, and had clearly been there for a while. The kid was playing with the woman's framed photo, turning it around in his hands. I stopped dead in my tracks. The couple behind me was asking if something was wrong, and I could feel my face getting hot with panic. We had put up 3 different signs: a "Please wait to be seated" sign at the entrance, a "Closed for private event" sign on a little easel near the table, and a "Reserved" sign right on the table itself. I took a deep breath and walked over to the table, trying to keep my voice calm and professional. I politely explained that the table was reserved for another party and that they would need to move. The old lady looked up at me with the most dismissive expression I've ever seen. She told me that no one was sitting there when they arrived and that they had been waiting for service for 20 minutes. I apologized for any confusion but explained that the table was specifically reserved and decorated for a special occasion and that I needed them to move to another table. She absolutely refused. She said that every other restaurant on the block was full and that they had every right to be there. She demanded to know if this was a public restaurant or not. The kid was still messing with the photo frame, and I could see the woman behind me getting more upset by the second. Her boyfriend was trying to comfort her, but I could tell she was close to tears. I tried to stay patient and explained that I understood they were hungry, but that our entire restaurant was fully booked that night. I told them that this specific table had been reserved and paid for in advance. She said that wasn't her problem and that they were there first, so they weren't moving. She blamed our customer service for the whole situation. My co-worker came over to help, and we both tried explaining the situation again. The kid had somehow managed to knock over the photo frame, and I watched the woman's face just crumble when she saw it. Whatever surprise she had planned was clearly being ruined. The old lady got even more aggressive, saying she didn't care about our decorations or whatever was going on. She demanded that we take her order right away and insisted they were staying put. The whole restaurant was starting to stare at this point. Other customers were looking over, and I could hear people whispering. This was exactly the kind of scene our manager always told us to avoid. My co-worker finally had enough and decided to get firm with them. She told the woman that if she didn't move from the table immediately, we would have to call the police to have them removed for trespassing. The old lady challenged us, saying we wouldn't dare because she was a paying customer. I pointed out that she wasn't actually a paying customer until she ordered something, and she couldn't order anything because she was sitting at someone else's table. The mention of police finally got through to her. She started gathering her things, complaining about terrible service and how she'd never come back. The kid was still holding the photo frame, and when I asked him to put it down, she snapped at me not to tell her grandson what to do because he was just a child. She finally dragged the kid away from the table, but not before he managed to leave sticky fingerprints all over the glass of the photo frame. When they left, she made sure to announce loudly to the entire restaurant that the service was terrible and that everyone should eat somewhere else. I quickly tried to clean up the table and fix the decorations, but the damage was done. The photo frame was smudged, one of the candles had been knocked over, and the whole romantic atmosphere felt ruined. When I finally seated the couple, they were polite about it, but I could see how disappointed the woman was. She tried to clean the photo frame with her napkin, but she was clearly fighting back tears. Her boyfriend was doing his best to cheer her up, but whatever moment she had been planning was completely destroyed. They ended up having a quiet dinner and left without much fanfare. I felt awful for the rest of the night. This woman had put so much thought and effort into planning something special, and some entitled stranger had ruined it just because she couldn't be bothered to read a few signs. I kept thinking about how excited she had been when she came in earlier to set up her photo, and how crushed she looked when she saw it had been messed with. The worst part is that there was nothing we could really do to fix it. We comped their meal and apologized profusely, but you can't recreate a moment like that. Whatever surprise or announcement she had planned was gone, and it was all because someone decided the rules didn't apply to them. I've been training in martial arts for about 8 years now. Started when I was 15 because I was tired of being the skinny kid who got picked on at school. My parents finally agreed to let me join the local dojo after I begged them for months. What started as a way to defend myself turned into a real passion. I earned my black belt 3 years ago, and now I help teach the younger kids on weekends. The dojo has always been like a second home to me. It's this old building downtown with wooden floors that creak when you walk on them and mirrors along one wall. Nothing fancy, but it's where I learned discipline, respect, and how to channel my energy into something positive. The owner is this old guy who's been doing martial arts since before I was born. He's tough but fair, and he doesn't tolerate any nonsense. About 6 months ago, this woman started bringing her son to classes. The kid was maybe 10 years old, pretty typical for our beginner group. Quiet, eager to learn, and he listened well to instructions. But his mom was a different story entirely. From day one, she had opinions about everything. During the first week, she walked up to me after class while I was cleaning up equipment. She demanded to know if I was one of the instructors. I told her I helped with the kids' classes and asked if there was something I could help her with. She immediately launched into a complaint about my teaching methods, claiming her son said I was being too hard on him. I was confused because I barely interacted with her kid beyond showing him basic stances. When I asked what she meant by too hard, she explained that he came home saying his legs hurt from the horse stance exercises. She insisted that was clearly too much for a child his age. I explained that some muscle soreness was normal when starting any physical activity, but she wasn't having it. She went on this rant about how martial arts should be fun, not painful, and how we needed to adjust our methods for her precious boy. Over the next few weeks, it got worse. She'd interrupt classes to correct my teaching, claiming she'd done research online and knew better approaches. She'd argue with the owner about belt testing requirements. She even tried to convince other parents that we were running some kind of abusive program. I overheard her telling another parent that our place clearly didn't understand modern parenting approaches. She claimed these children needed positive reinforcement, not this military-style training. The other parent mentioned that her daughter seemed to really enjoy it and was more confident than she'd ever been. But this woman insisted that was just what the kid was telling her parents, and that deep down, she was probably traumatized. The breaking point came during a weekend class about 3 weeks ago. We were working on wooden sword techniques with the older kids. These are practice weapons, obviously not real swords. The wood is smooth and lightweight, designed specifically for training. Safety is always our top priority. Her son was in the group and we were going through basic forms. Nothing advanced, just simple movements to get them used to holding the weapon properly. I was demonstrating a technique when she stormed onto the mat. She yelled at me to stop right there, declaring that I wasn't putting a weapon in her child's hands. I tried to explain that these were practice weapons that were perfectly safe when used properly under supervision. She shot back that she didn't care what I called them, insisting those were weapons and she wouldn't have her son exposed to this violence. The owner tried to calm her down, explaining that weapon forms were a traditional part of martial arts training and that safety was always maintained. But she was beyond reason at this point. She started screaming about how this was exactly the kind of toxic masculinity that was wrong with martial arts. She accused us of teaching children to be violent. Then she grabbed one of the wooden swords from the equipment rack. At first, I thought she was just going to take it away or something, but then she raised it above her head and came straight at me. She shouted that she was going to show me how it felt to be threatened with a weapon. She swung down hard, aiming directly for my head. I could see the rage in her eyes. This wasn't just anger anymore. This was someone who'd completely lost control and was actively trying to hurt me. Training kicked in automatically. I stepped to the side, grabbed her wrist, and used her own momentum to take her down to the mat. Not hard enough to hurt her, just enough to stop the attack and get the weapon away from her. The entire class was dead silent. Kids were staring with wide eyes. Parents had their phones out. Her son was crying in the corner. I told everyone to stay back and announced that I was calling the police. She immediately started screaming that I couldn't do this to her and that she was the victim. She claimed that this place had attacked her child and she was defending him. She kept screaming about how she was going to sue us, how she was going to shut us down, how we were all going to pay for traumatizing her family. But nobody was buying it. Everyone had seen exactly what happened. The police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 officers came in and immediately started asking questions. They talked to me first, then the owner, then several parents who witnessed everything. When they asked her to tell her side of the story, she insisted that we were running an illegal fighting ring and forcing children to use weapons. She claimed she was protecting her son. The officer asked if she was saying she took a weapon and attempted to strike me. She replied that she was making a point about how dangerous this place was. While she was digging herself deeper, the owner showed the officers our security footage. The cameras caught everything. Her grabbing the sword, the attack, my defensive response. It was all right there in black and white. The second officer talked to some of the parents as witnesses. One parent explained that she'd been causing problems since day one, always complaining and arguing with the instructors. But this attack was completely unprovoked. Another parent said they saw the whole thing, describing how she grabbed that sword and went after me like she was trying to really hurt me. They noted that I barely touched her when I stopped her. Even her own son, through his tears, told the officers that his mom had been angry about the class and that nobody at the dojo had done anything wrong. She protested that this was ridiculous and that she was the one who was assaulted. She pointed to her wrist as evidence, while the officer explained that the footage showed her initiating the attack with a weapon and that I had used minimal force to defend myself and disarm her. They arrested her right there in the dojo. Assault with a weapon, they said. When they led her away in handcuffs, she was still screaming about how this was all a conspiracy and how she was going to get revenge on all of us. The owner immediately banned her from the property and refunded her son's remaining classes. The poor kid ended up staying with his dad who seemed like a decent guy who was probably relieved to have an excuse to get custody. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the prosecutor's office. They wanted me to testify at her trial. Apparently, she'd been arrested twice before for similar incidents at her son's school and at a youth soccer league. This was part of a pattern of behavior. The trial was quick, the video evidence was pretty damning, and with multiple witnesses backing up the same story, her lawyer couldn't do much. She got 6 months in jail and a restraining order keeping her away from the dojo. Her ex-husband got full custody of their son during the proceedings. Turns out this kind of explosive behavior had been going on at home too, and the court decided the kid was better off with his dad. The son actually came back to classes a few weeks later with his father. He apologized for his mom's behavior, though we all told him it wasn't his fault. He's doing great now, working hard on his forms and making friends with the other kids. Without his mom's constant interference and negativity, he's actually turned out to be one of our most dedicated students. I've been divorced for 3 years now, and my ex-wife and I have managed to keep things civil for our daughter's sake. She's 13 and goes to this tiny school where her entire grade has only 18 kids. It's one of those places where everyone knows everyone, which can be both good and bad. My daughter has always been quiet and focused. She does well in school and plays soccer twice a week. She's not the type to cause drama or seek attention. That's probably why she clashes so much with one particular classmate. Let's call her the problem child. This kid is the complete opposite of my daughter. She's loud, disruptive, and seems to think everything is about her. My daughter has complained about her for months, saying she interrupts lessons, makes weird noises during quiet time, and generally makes school miserable for everyone who actually wants to learn. So when my daughter's 13th birthday was coming up, I asked her who she wanted to invite. She gave me a list of 7 girls from her class and 5 from her soccer team. When I noticed she hadn't included the problem child, I asked why. My daughter told me that the problem child ruins school for her all the time, and she didn't want her to ruin her birthday too. That made perfect sense to me. It's her birthday, her choice. I sent out the invitations to the 12 girls on her list, and everything seemed set. And now my ex-wife and I have this arrangement where we both attend our daughter's major events instead of doing separate celebrations. It works well usually. But an hour before the party, my ex-wife dropped a bomb on me. She told me she had invited the problem child too because her mom found out about the party and was upset she wasn't included. I told her this wasn't her decision to make and that our daughter didn't want her there. My ex-wife brushed off my concerns and said it was just one more kid, asking what the big deal was. I explained that the big deal was our daughter getting to choose who comes to her own birthday party, but it was too late. The problem child was already on her way over with her mother. When they arrived, I saw my daughter's face fall. She looked at me with this betrayed expression. I told her to just try to enjoy her party and not let this ruin her day. She started to protest, but I could see she was trying to hold back tears. I acknowledged that I understood how she felt. For the first hour, things went okay. The problem child was being relatively well behaved, probably because all the other kids were there. My daughter was trying her best to have fun despite the unwanted guest. Then came time for the cake. My daughter had requested this special glitter cake, where when you blow out the candles, edible glitter shoots everywhere. She'd been talking about it for weeks. All the girls gathered around when I brought it out, and my daughter's face lit up for the first time since the unwanted guest arrived. That's when everything went wrong. While everyone was singing happy birthday and my daughter was getting ready to make her wish, the problem child reached over and swiped her finger directly through the top layer of the cake. She dragged a huge chunk of frosting right off, leaving this ugly gash across the beautiful decoration. The room went silent. Everyone just stared. My daughter's face went from excitement to horror to pure rage in about 3 seconds. My daughter demanded to know what was wrong with the problem child. The problem child said she just wanted to taste it. My daughter exploded, telling her she had ruined the cake and that this was exactly why she didn't want her there. She screamed that the problem child ruins everything and that she hated her. She ran upstairs to her room. and I was left standing there with a ruined cake in a room full of shocked kids. The problem child was sobbing, and her mother immediately went into protective mode. The problem child's mother was furious and demanded that my daughter apologize right away for speaking to her child that way. I pointed out that her kid had just destroyed the birthday cake and that at 12 years old, she should know better than to touch someone else's cake. The mother insisted that her daughter was just a child and that mistakes happen. I told her that my daughter was also just a child who was upset that her birthday cake got ruined. My ex-wife, of course, sided with the problem child's mother. She said our daughter was way too harsh and needed to apologize for what she said. I asked if she really wanted our daughter to apologize for telling the truth, pointing out that her friend had ruined the cake. My ex-wife called our daughter cruel, but I said she was honest and hurt. The problem child's mother kept demanding an apology, and my ex-wife kept backing her up. Meanwhile, my daughter was upstairs crying on what was supposed to be her special day. I told everyone they needed to leave because the party was over. The problem child's mother refused to go until my daughter apologized to hers. I explained that my daughter had nothing to apologize for and that she should be sorry she didn't get to enjoy her own birthday party because someone she didn't want there showed up anyway and ruined her cake. My ex-wife said I was being unreasonable. I told her I was being a parent and that our daughter had set a boundary, she had ignored it, and now she wanted to punish our daughter for being upset about the results. I started cleaning up while they argued. The other kids were uncomfortable and started leaving with their parents. Finally, the problem child's mother stormed out, still demanding an apology that she was never going to get. After everyone left, I went upstairs to check on my daughter. She was lying on her bed, still crying. I apologized that her party got ruined. She asked why her mom had invited the problem child when she had said she didn't want her there. I told her I didn't know, but that she didn't have to apologize for being upset. She said the problem child always does stuff like this and can't help herself. I told her that wasn't her problem to fix. The next day, my ex-wife called me. She said the problem child's mother was threatening to call the school about this. I told her to let her try and asked what she would say, that her daughter ruined someone's birthday cake and got called out for it. My ex-wife said I wasn't handling this right. I told her I was handling it perfectly and that our daughter had learned she doesn't have to tolerate people who disrespect her, even on her birthday. She said everyone thought I was being difficult about this. I told her I didn't care what everyone thought because I cared about our daughter. A week later, the problem child's mother did call the school. She complained that my daughter had been bullying her child. But when the principal heard the full story, including the part about the cake, she just said that birthday parties are private events and not school business. The problem child's mother also tried to get other parents on her side, but most of them had kids who'd been in class with the problem child for years. They knew exactly what kind of kid she was. I run a small business with an amazing team. We're not huge, but we're solid. The pandemic hit everyone hard, but we made it through without laying anyone off. I took a pay cut instead. We even moved to working from home permanently, which saved us a ton of money when we didn't renew our office lease. My team is incredible. These people have been with me for years. The newest person has been here 7 years. They're the kind of employees who could walk into any company tomorrow and get hired on the spot. I know how lucky I am to have them, and I treat them accordingly. My wife has this friend who I'll call Karen. She's one of those people who just can't be happy. If things are going well, she'll find something to complain about. If things are going badly, she'll complain even more. My wife has the patience of a saint. She's been married to me for 30 years after all, and she always tries to cheer Karen up. Last December, Karen was working at some office job. Right before Christmas, she put in a vacation request for the week of Christmas. The problem was everyone else had already requested their time off months earlier and got approved. When her request got denied, she decided to throw a tantrum and quit on the spot. She thought her boss would panic and give her what she wanted. Instead, they processed her resignation paperwork the same day and told her not to come back. She'd been unemployed ever since, and this was now May. Last Sunday, my wife was hosting one of her wine and crafts nights A bunch of her friends came over to drink wine and work on various projects. I usually stay out of the way, but I wandered into the kitchen to grab a snack and ran into Karen. I asked her how the job search was going, trying to make polite conversation. She immediately launched into a complaint about how terrible everything was and how nobody wanted to hire good people anymore. I felt a little bad for her, so I tried to be encouraging and told her I was sure something would come up soon. That's when she asked me to hire her. I wasn't offended by the question. You can't get what you don't ask for, right? I explained that we weren't hiring right now and that business was steady, but we were fully staffed. Then she said something that made my jaw drop. She told me she knew she was a hard worker and asked why I wouldn't just fire someone and hire her instead. I actually had to pause for a second. Did she really just suggest I fire one of my longtime employees to make room for her? I explained that my staff had been with me for almost a decade and I couldn't just fire someone to create an opening. She insisted that since I was the owner, I could do anything I wanted. The idea that I would throw away years of loyalty and trust just to hire someone who quit her last job in a fit of rage was insane. I told her that wasn't how good businesses worked and said I needed to go check on something. I got out of there before I said something I'd regret. The next day, I was on the phone with another small business owner in town. Let's call him Bob. We know each other through the local business association. He was complaining about struggling to find good people and mentioned he was down 2 employees and couldn't seem to find anyone reliable. That's when I remembered Karen's request. Against my better judgment, I decided to help her out. I told him I might know someone and explained that my wife had a friend who was looking for work. I admitted I didn't know her professional background that well, but said she seemed motivated to find something. Bob said to have her call him and that at this point he'd interview anyone. I told my wife about the conversation and she passed along Bob's information to Karen. I figured maybe this would work out for everyone. Today Bob called me back. I could tell from his tone that this wasn't going to be good news. He asked me how well I knew Karen, and I told him honestly that I didn't know her that well since she was my wife's friend. Then I asked why he was asking. He explained that the interview had lasted less than 45 minutes. When I said that wasn't necessarily bad, he clarified that it would have been fine if she was interviewing for the job he had available, but she spent the entire time trying to convince him to hire her for positions he already had filled. I asked him what he meant, and he explained that he told her the opening was for a customer service position. She kept interrupting him to ask about management roles, supervisor positions, even his bookkeeper's job. When he explained those positions were already filled, she asked why he wouldn't consider promoting those people to make room for her. I felt my stomach drop and asked if he was serious. He told me he was dead serious and went on to explain that she'd actually suggested he restructure his entire company around her skill set. She said she'd be willing to train his current employees to do different jobs so she could take over the role she really wanted. I apologized profusely, saying I had no idea she would do something like that. Bob told me it got worse. When he tried to redirect the conversation back to the actual opening, she said she wasn't interested in doing customer service work because it was beneath her qualifications. Then she asked if he knew any other business owners who might have better opportunities. I begged him to tell me. He was making this up, but he insisted he wasn't. He said she left his office with a list of his competitors' names and asked him to call them to set up interviews for her. Not only had Karen completely blown the interview, but she'd also put me in an awkward position with another business owner. I apologized again, explaining that I honestly thought I was helping both of them out. Bob was gracious about it and said not to worry. He even admitted it was kind of entertaining since he'd never had someone try to redesign his entire company during a job interview before. After I hung up, I sat there shaking my head. My wife came into my office and asked how things went. When she asked if Karen got the job, I told her not exactly and explained that Karen had tried to convince Bob to fire his existing employees and restructure his company around her. My wife was shocked and asked what I meant. I told her the whole story. By the end, even my patient wife was speechless and said she couldn't believe Karen had done that. I told her the worst part was that Karen would probably blame Bob for not recognizing her potential. Sure enough, Later that evening, my wife got a call from Karen complaining about how Bob didn't appreciate qualified candidates and how his business was probably failing because he wouldn't make smart hiring decisions. The next morning, I got a text from Karen asking if I knew any other business owners who might be hiring. I decided not to respond. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.